My conversation today is with Ivo Dominguez Jr. Ivo is an author, teacher, and practitioner of magic and the occult arts. A seasoned and self-proclaimed witch, he has been active in the Wicca and pagan communities since 1978, and he's been teaching since 1982. Two of Ivo's books also happen to be personal favorites of mine on the subjects of astrology and visualization and meditation as they pertain to the practice of magic, these being Practical Astrology for Witches and Pagans and Keys to Perception. Ivo and I sat down to talk about his trajectory through the Western mysteries and his particular milieu within the Wiccan and pagan communities, as well as his perspectives on the importance of practical application in magic and finding the powers of the observable universe within. I'm Ike Baker, and this is the Arcanvm Podcast. I know that you are very vocal as a practitioner of magic and of ritual and things like that. I love that, so am I. But you specifically, I guess the category you would use is witch. Am I correct in that?
Yeah, and that's a complicated thing all by itself.
Right. So, right. So there's so much going on there. I was wondering how, if you do get the question, how do you explain it in order to differentiate it from other types of magical or spiritual paths? Yeah. What does it mean to you?
Okay, well, I'll start with how it came about that I chose that term. Because honestly, if you had met me when I was in my late teens, early 20s, I would have said, oh, I'm a magician, probably. And I think that was primarily because my father was a professor. And at that time, if your dad or mom was a professor, you automatically got the magical library card to give you access to the university library. So I was able to spend hours and hours in the library and go to interlibrary loan and ask them, hey, I want you to find me this rare tome. And they took me seriously. So the vast majority of the material that I was exposed to initially would definitely fall into the Western mysteries, Western magic tradition. And yeah, I also had a lot of time that I spent outdoors in nature. And I was a kid that was likely to wander off into the woods with a book and return somehow miraculously just in time to meet curfew getting home. So that I had a strong connection to nature. The other bit is that my experience at the time was that ceremonialists were not terribly community-minded. There was a great deal of focus on the individual. And that leads to ultimately why I chose witch, even though not to say that there aren't plenty of witches that are solitary and very much individualist, but there's a greater culture of community, especially in the last, I'm going to say 30 years or so, that's been more the case as well. And as it turned out, the very first real world contact I had with a magical practitioner was somebody who was a witch. And I've told this story many times, but my parents were very insistent, sound mind, sound body, yada, yada. So I had to find some kind of physical activity. And I was not terribly interested in sports at school. I was a good runner, but I had, once again, a solitary sport. But I got them to agree to the following. My high school was walking distance to the university campus where my dad taught. So the school, and I was a good student, so the school agreed, sure, we'll let him do that. So I would leave the high school campus, go to the U of D campus, and I would go to fence. And fencing was my sport because that wasn't something available at the high school and something that appealed to me on multiple levels. And I got pretty good at it. There was a brief flirtation, like I could be good. And honestly, I could probably get onto the Olympic team because there's not much competition in the United States, especially then. But, other things took my interest. However, changing in the locker room real fast, and this other guy who was also a fencer was there. And to my, young teenage eyes, they looked ancient, which meant that they were grad students at the time. And as they were changing, out from underneath popped their t-shirt, popped a tiny little pentacle, and my eyes went straight to it. And I said, "Oh, are you Alexandrian? Are you Gardnerian? Are you Georgian? Are you?" And his eyes got really big because this miner in the locker room and he's basically said, "Stop talking. Let's take this outside." And of course, in retrospect, I understood just the horrible dilemma that he felt suddenly he was being thrust into. So he went outside and he said, "Look, you're underage. No coven worth its salt would take you. However," and this was using the magical object of that era, he said, "If you give me a pile of self-addressed stamped envelopes, which was the thing of the era, then you will receive the newsletter that our group puts out. And when you come of age, you can come to our things." So as soon as I turned 18, I managed to catch a bus and go to a picnic. Back then, it was before the era of the pagan camping festival scene or the conference scene. So people actually would, get a pavilion at a public park or forest and pretend that they're having a cookout and picnic, but really it was to gather together and talk about magic. So my initial contact with community was witch, and when we ended up creating collectively the tradition that we're part of, we went with it because of its connections to working collectively more so than is generally the pattern. Not that lodges don't exist, but really it's a different kind of hierarchy and it has a different purpose in mind.
That's excellent. That's a wonderful story, actually. Not everybody has like really cool stories like that, so that's that's good to hear.
I am a weird magnet.
Well, I did get the sense in some of your writings, actually, that you seem to be absolutely trained by either someone well-versed in the Western initiatic traditions or had, studied well the Great Arcanum. So I definitely, you definitely get that sense out of it. That's why I asked the question, where did witch come in?
Yeah, which came in primarily through those were the communities that I connected with. I had a profound love of nature and still do. The picture behind me in this is actually a picture taken on the land I live on. That's what it'll look like in a couple of months. It's still pretty cold here.
That's excellent.
But I will say that two of the people that I consider to be primary influences, teachers in my life, include Dolores Ashcroft-Nowitzki, who was the director for Servants of the Light for many, many years, and a lesser known person named Shakma Windrum. And both of them come from the ceremonial stream of things. If I had to pick teachers in the witchcraft community, I'll probably, point at people like, I don't know, I was definitely influenced by Lady Antigone of Keepers of Ancient Mysteries and a bunch of others. So I can point at a variety of teachers, but I would say that my initial reading was primarily Western mysteries and two of my primary teachers. Now, interestingly enough, in both cases, both Dolores and Shakma, I declined initiation from both of them. And the reason was that I had already made as many oaths and promises to other things that I could possibly keep. So I said, I can't make these pledges. I can't make these oaths because I'm already up to my gills in other commitments. However, when Shakma passed, I was the person that she had selected to do her memorial service. Dolores and I still are remarkably close, and I think of her as my other mom. Even though she's away on the Isle of Jersey and she's in her mid-90s, and the occasional Zoom, and that's about it nowadays. But so it depends on where the conversation goes, but there's a lot of ways that different things got woven in. One of the first people that was a part of the founding group of the tradition I'm part of, her prior experience was primarily in the Sabian assembly. I don't know if you've run across. So,
yeah.
I've had the very good fortune of being a confluence of many influences at many places in my life, and I'm very grateful for it.
Yes, you sound incredibly well-rounded, sir. But you also get, or at least I get the sense of that from your work, right? So I had picked up your book, Keys to Perception,
Oh
and
yeah,
it's and like hundreds, literally hundreds of other books. It sat on my shelf for a while,
right.
and then a friend of mine that I had known for through an initiatic order, who was much more of was also plugged into the pagan communities and things like that in this area
Mhm.
over here. She highly recommended Astrology for witches and
Practical
pagans.
practical astrology, yeah, for witches
Right,
and pagans.
exactly. And so my training being in, Western magic, primarily the Hermetic
Right.
Order of Dawn,
Yeah, yeah.
I at first I was just kind of like,
Meh.
is this going to be more new agey kind of stuff that everything has value, everything, but it's just not really my
Not your
cup of
thing.
tea.
Yeah.
She insisted that I give it a shot, right? By invoking the old adage, don't judge a book by its cover. I
Right.
I grabbed the thing. I devoured it in a day, and to this day, it's one of the best books on astrology I have ever read. And
Thank you.
I took notes. I still use in certain, and I always give you credit. I still use in certain classes the astral temple meditation, because
Right,
that
right.
visualization is incredible in getting
Mhm.
you to figure out just how all these moving
Right.
parts work synchronously. And to me, there is no, aside from really going outside and looking up at the night sky, which still it's hard to get a sense. That is the
Mhm.
best exercise. It was the best way for me to kind of understand how everything in astrology was interwoven. So I find that your writing is well rounded in a way that is deeply satisfying to people who do crave a little bit more of the intellectual stuff and the reasoning behind
Mhm.
why things are classified the way they are. And then also, there's a tremendous part of me that I live extremely rurally, as you do. I
Yeah.
am nourished by being out in nature, and I take frequent trips to Greece to just because I'm of Greek heritage, to just go there and just be around those old pagan temples and
Mhm.
bathe in that energy and stuff like that. So I really felt like your work it satisfied both parts of me. And so I kind of recognized that maybe there was also that in you too, right? So
Yeah, though I'll tell you that the astrology book, and I'm happy the way it turned out. Though it's been interesting, the feedback people that are in life, it's people really, really love it, and they're the people it's for. And then my friends who are astrologer with a capital A were like, we were really hoping you would write something for us.
of course.
And I said, the whole point of the book was to try to introduce astrology so that a greater number of people could, make it work in their practice, as opposed to, you know, when the time comes, I'll write something that is meant just for the 1/3 of 1% of people that consider themselves astrologers with capital A, for whom that would be interesting. And honestly, if anything, most of the time, and when I'm teaching a class or I'm writing, my goal is to try to make things as accessible as possible, because I plowed through a crap ton, that's the proper technical term, a crap ton of books that were intentionally written to be off-putting or pedantic, and or filled with little cul-de-sacs you had to work yourself out of. And I get it, and I know why. I understand why they thought that was cool at the time. I don't think it's cool.
Right.
The mysteries protect
Um,
themselves.
right, exactly. I mean, I try and remind people they're called mysteries for a reason.
Yeah.
They're kind of self-keeping secrets to a degree. But
Yep.
it's it's interesting that you say that you come from that practical standpoint, right? Because there is a lot of
Theory.
uh Yes, there's so much theory. There's so much theory right now, and it's like magic doesn't come to life unless you do it, right? It's a verb. So you need
Yeah,
the theory. That's where I
absolutely.
like what that's where I
Absolutely.
love what you've done, is that there is theory. It's not just
Uh-huh.
it's not simply whatever feels right. Because I think at a certain point, using the theory, you can get to a point where it feels even better.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the example I often give is it, and your musical talents may vary, but most people get the idea. So if you see a bunch of musicians, in particular jazz musicians, but it doesn't have to be, and after a few moments on stage, they suddenly just decide to go off in a dozen different directions and improvise something amazing together. And it sounds coherent and musical, and it has progression and all these cool things. And there's no musical score in front of them. However, people go, "Oh, this is because it's coming from their soul, it's coming from their gut." And I'm saying, yes, but they also have deeply ingrained, these are the chord progressions, these are the riffs, this is how you shift from this key to that key without it sounding like a train wreck. So all the structure is so deeply ingrained in them that they can then go crazy. And I feel that if you deeply understand why things work a particular way, and even if that's not the way they work, by the way, because most of the times when magicians or witches come up with a mechanism of action, what they're really coming up with is not a mechanism of action, but an interface that fits and works.
Yes,
So
absolutely.
no, I think it gives you more freedom if you actually absorb the theory and the structure. And then you can go crazy and it doesn't sound like crap.
Right. Yeah. And I think at that point, right, I do happen to be a musician for many years. I did that. It was kind of my first real career. But what I found is, that improvisation, like you're saying, which is, the underlying substance of it being all that ingrained information and muscle memory, it
Yes.
allows you also to truly express yourself,
Yes.
in a way where the music is what you are for a time period. It's like it's almost stream of consciousness expressive. So I love that analogy. Do you play anything? You a musician?
Oh, yes and no. So here, I love music, and I've written a bazillion chants. And there was a brief stint in my existence where I played saxophone in high school band, but that was it. I'm honestly going to say that I'm one of those people that has a classic Sagittarian in this perspective. I have too many interests, so I have to constantly work to prune it down to the number of things that I actually have hours in the day for. And sadly, I gave up a lot of things except the occasional chant writing,
Yeah. Well,
and
that's a
way too much music stored on my computer. I think I have like 7.5 days of music before it would repeat.
wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So after the official podcast, I'll have to get a couple of recommendations from you. I use music a lot in sort of a ritual and
Yeah.
visualization
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
context. But what also kind of very much interests me or draws me to your work is that idea of being practical about stuff. So, I mean, what are some of the ways right now in which you're kind of using magic or astrology or something like that in your day-to-day life within, I guess, the microcosm of your environment? I know a lot of people that listen to this, and a lot of people that have been on the podcast are, in this vein, and they also happen to be, like yourself, writers, authors, things like that, creatives. So I don't know, I guess, how would you, what kind of things do you use to uh I guess traverse or navigate your life day to day that are informed by magic?
All right. As a for example, uh, the neighbors needed some help moving a wood stove into their house. And it's a lovely soapstone wood stove, so it'll hold the heat for a long time, which means it is really heavy. So I was one of the only people available, and there was a narrow little door, and so that there were three of us trying to carry this wood stove in. And just before going in there, I drew up some energy. I connected to the celestial sky within. I scribed on my thighs and on my arms the sigil for Mars, and I breathed in that red martial energy. And I will tell you that I didn't hurt myself. And for the period of 15, 20 minutes that was required to get that wood stove in place, I was temporarily stronger than I normally am.
That's amazing. That's that's
I
excellent.
mean, but I'm going to say, people go, so can I do that too? And it's like, yes, as soon as you can close your eyes and find where Mars lives inside you.
Right, right. That's an excellent analogy. It's just so cool because there's so many people that I meet that I think are hungry for the application of magic in things and it just never crosses their mind, and it didn't for me for a really long time too. It never crossed my mind that I could use it for something as mundane or as, quote unquote simple as drawing physical strength and vitality and energy. And I think that's a really, really good example of it. I'll use Mars if I like, I guess sort of like an etheric or energetic cup of coffee when I don't have one available.
Right. Oh, I travel a fair amount because of, now that at least COVID is still a big issue in the world. Let's not minimize it, but people are traveling more, and I am too. And I don't travel with everything that I need magically or whatever. So you're probably familiar with the practice of the memory palace, where you create a building or a palace or a place in your mind to store memory and have easy access to it.
Yep.
Well, my memory palace has a garden attached to it. And in that garden, I have the herbs that I most commonly use, either for medicinal or magical purposes. And they're plants that I've actually held in my hand in real life and smell them, and I know what they are. And then so that, let's say I'm traveling and I get an upset tummy, I will go into my memory garden. I will pluck some peppermint from that garden, and I will then come back into this consciousness, and I will see myself dropping the peppermint into my mug or my water bottle and sipping on it to soothe my belly. So that people say, well, why does that work? And it's like, well, because I know that plant and I have formed a relationship with that energy pattern, and I know it, and it's no crazier than homeopathy, because it's really just the energy imprint on the water that I'm drinking in, but I've stored it within me.
That's awesome, man. That's such a cool technique. I'm gonna have to give that a shot.
Give it a try.
Yeah. We're just starting getting growing season ready here. We're doing some indoor stuff, and plants are really taking off. We working by the moon and all that stuff, but recently switched over to sidereal because of actually an interview I had on this particular podcast with an alchemist who runs a research academy named Phoenix Aurelius. I don't know if you've heard of him or anything like that, but he's done a lot of really cool work researching these things in the most controlled experimental way possible. But it's just excellent to be using magic in that context, and it's super refreshing to see the way that I just feel like that it's so important. More people should be writing books about these kinds of techniques. Are you working on anything? Is that something that you could talk about?
So I'm working on too many things at once. And actually, yesterday I taught a Zoom class on spells, operative magic, and workings, just as a practical application thing. And I am working on one project that's got a home already and one that will eventually. So starting June of this year, every month there will be a book released of which I've written half of, and then a secondary author. And it's a series called The Witch's Sun Sign, and it focuses on the tapping into the power of your sun sign as a witch. Short little books, and they're meant for more of an introductory thing for people. But so the last year told you to trust. We need you to write half of each book, find the writers for all the other bits and pieces. We want all 12 books done in a 14-month period. And I said, Sure, I'm crazy.
Wow.
Now they're short books. They're only like 40,000 words each. But nonetheless, it's a lot. At the same time that I've been doing that, which I think is a valuable thing for people, I've been doing a side project that I will send off to publishers to see who wants it. And that's a book that is the flip side to Keys to Perception. It's my working title in my head, which they won't use, is Level Up, but it is basically all the active stuff: raising, shaping, containing, moving energy. So it's all the active techniques as opposed to the receptions. So in the works, that one's about halfway written. It's what I've been doing to cleanse my palate in between the astrology witch sign books. So I keep busy, and in April, I'm one of the organizers for a big Mid-Atlantic States Between the World Sacred Space Conference. So I don't stop moving much.
Yeah, that tends to be a trend with people who who get super deep into this kind of stuff and magic. I mean, but like you're saying, you probably have techniques for pulling energy in where you need to and focus and things like that.
So it's not the painting of Dorian Gray, but so here's two things. So I have on an index card. When I was, I think like 18, 19, I painted a tarot card of me to use as a significator in readings. But I still have it. And I actually, it's kind of like, this is an imprint of me when I was at my physical prime. So I have, and I kind of use that kind of like the little tuning fork for what my energy should feel like. I also have a small fire agate, though, honestly, and it could be anything. And every time that I'm feeling particularly vital and feeling really, really good, I go grab that stone and pour myself into it. Now, what do I use? I use them as a way to check in, like, what's wrong with my energy? What do I need to do to move it towards a more vital place? And the fire agate is if somebody is a healer that's going to work on me, I basically put in their hand and say, hey, tune into this. That's what my template should feel like.
Wow, that's excellent, man. It sounds like a magical science. This is actual wizardry we're talking about right here.
Well, and one of the things is that I don't publish a blog or put something in my books that hasn't been thoroughly tested by other people, not just me, because things that work for you may or may not translate for other people. So I have people that basically beta test things, or the covens in our tradition will often go, here, do you want to try this? Tell me what it feels like. We don't have it anymore. Well, we have one. On the property, we have a pole barn that we used to have a room in it that we called the blast chamber. Now it's been moved to a circle out in the woods. But if we're going to do something that's iffy and we don't know if it's going to work well or blow up in our face, we used to use that room, and now we use a space outdoors, because you don't want to do that kind of stuff in your house or in your backyard where you live if something goes wrong and you need to clean it up later.
Right.
But
yeah.
No, testing's important. And refining. Nobody ever gets a formula or a technique or a ritual or working perfect the first time through.
Yeah, I think that was one of the biggest boons for me in joining an esoteric order, coming out of I needed structure. I was in a point in my life where I really desperately needed some kind of structure, and that's kind of, I could have gone a solo practitioner route, because I there's still that part of me that's so almost like so individualistic that it kind of misses the point and shoots itself in the foot every once in a while. But so there's still that there. But at the time, it just needed to be reined in. And one of the two biggest boons of it was keeping a journal, a written record of my experiences that I still refer to as the quote unquote empirical record, right? Because magic is not necessarily so much scientific as it is empirical. These things are there is a level of empiricism to them, and also meditation. Maybe not in the truest sense or the purest sense of that word, but concentration. And I liked I think the way that you had put it in Keys to Perception was polishing the mirror of the mind.
Yeah.
So that has stuck with me. Just as a visual, again, the visuals you provide are really, really, I think that they're very, very positive, and by that I mean active images for people who have a magical imagination, right? Because that's something that you train. And it's stuck with me very clearly. And every once in a while, when I feel my life is crazy too, right? But every once in a while, when I feel like I'm getting burnout or overwhelmed, I get that vision of this hand polishing a mirror, and I know exactly what it means. I have to sit and be still and be centered. And I regard that kind of like as one of the first lessons of magic. I mean, would you agree with that? You know, I mean, there's a lot of clearing out to be done before you can begin, as you're saying, to go on to part two, the active stuff.
I think so. I mean, and there's a lot of ways to define or to practice meditation, contemplation, and so on. And you've got to find the one that you will actually do rather than one that you think you're supposed to do, because that's one of the first steps. And if you don't do it, you might have sporadic success when it so happens that your inner world is clean and shiny. But if you want consistency of result and forward progress, then it's basically the basic maintenance that is required to make it possible to do the work in a consistent and good way. I mean, I know, and people say, well, what about people that seem to be able to do all sorts of amazing stuff and they're train wreck and they clearly haven't done any of these meditative or and guess what? They're a train wreck. And you just because you can outside world with your magic doesn't necessarily mean that it is to your advantage.
Right. Yeah. And I think that another aspect of, I guess, prerequisite work for magic to me is the ordering of your life to a degree. But in a way that not in a way that's kind of arbitrary or, you know, legalistic or militaristic, but in a way
or monastic.
Right, exactly. I mean, you know, for some people,
you could if that's you.
Yeah. It's not, but it's not me. But I have found that like sort of ordering it the way that nature orders itself, you know, where it's kind of this seamless whole. Even if it resembles chaos, there's definitely an underlying order that doesn't get broken.
Yeah, I see that. I mean, from the outside, people look like your life is got too many things in the air at once. You're doing too many things. How can you possibly? And yet, at night, I put my head down and I fall straight asleep, and I wake up and I have energy to do it again. Here's what I'm going to suggest is the compass that I use for deciding: am I doing the right things? Am I doing it right? If I continue to have energy and vitality to do things, then I'm doing it right. Because my general principle is, if you're in alignment with what you're supposed to be doing, you're granted more access to your energy and to your core. If you fall out of alignment with what you're supposed to be doing and what your core is, then you have diminishing access to a life force.
That's excellent advice. And it's definitely I mean, just candidly, it's coming at the right time for me. So thank you for that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm 64. I'll be 65 this year, and I mean, I can tell I've slowed down, but other people go, "Really?"
Yeah, I mean, and how much do you think you're in your actual physical environment? You know, people like us choose to we do a lot of stuff. We get involved with large groups of people. I mean, you have an influence, obviously, that reaches at the very least as far as me in distance. Yet we kind of live rurally in the middle of nowhere, easy access to nature, sort of stuff. I find that has it's improved my quality of mind. I mean, do you think that you draw energy and vitality in any kind of way just from where you've chosen to live?
Yeah, absolutely. And I have friends who can draw vitality from cityscapes because that's the way they're wired and how they work. But for me to recharge fully and deeply, being out in nature is an important thing for me. And I also going to say, it seems like for some people a pain in the butt. However, and it's like today it was especially cold. But my routine of, I have to, feed and water the chickens and check for eggs in the morning. We're starting seedlings inside, and the garden's its own thing. We keep bees, and bees are actually remarkably high maintenance nowadays for a variety of reasons. And those things get me up and moving and connecting with nature. Even, yes, I love it when I go out and sit outside in the woods. But simply the actions of doing these things that seem fairly mundane connect me with the world. And every time I'm outside taking care of the garden, taking care of the bees or the chickens, I notice things. I notice flowers. I notice leaves. I notice the sky. There's never a time that I don't take something back with me from that. And find what feeds you. For some, I mean, like I said, I have friends for whom the city is the place where they are most alive. And for me, this is where I live. And urban environments are where I go for particular events or particular conferences or gatherings or whatnot. And that's part of my work, but not all of it. I will say, though, that because I mentioned it yesterday, I have a little poppet made that's me. And people go, well, what's that one for? Oh, that's my poppet that's surrounded by a whole crap ton of protection and is sitting on my birth chart, so that because I show up on people's inner landscape and on their radar when I teach or go to a conference or a gathering, or they read something of mine or they saw me online, if you are even let's be real, I'm a medium-sized fish in a small pond, because the occult pagan community isn't that big, really. But they're focused thinkers. And I think that if you're going to be quasi-public or public, you need to set up some kind of firewall between your energy and what gets thrown at you on a regular basis.
Interesting, because it was just in the past week, to the point where I was like looking up what was going on astrologically and any trends and stuff like that. I had been experiencing like a really, really hard time, and it almost felt like there was some kind of external energy that was interfering with stuff specifically regarding what I do with this podcast and with like YouTube lectures and stuff like that. It was so hyper specific to this stuff that it got me thinking, like, I think I need to up my sort of protection, as you're saying.
Yeah. And the thing is, like most things, 9 times out of 10, it's not like somebody is doing a malicious working against you. But let's be real. If people are thinking about, feeling emotions, focusing on, they're sending there's no intention to do harm or mal. But if somebody gets worked up, and it can even be a positive thing, like, I'm so excited about that, but that's just energy poking at you and disrupting your flow. It falls in the same category of when people. I hardly ever tell people online if I am ill or need assistance in any way, because I don't want 3 trillion people throwing their good intended healing at me, meaning then getting no sleep or getting inflammation because it's too much energy at the wrong time. You know what I'm saying? It's
yeah, that's excellent. Yeah, I think the first time I had ever read about this idea of people unintentionally sort of interfering was in Psychic Self-Defense by Dion Fortune.
Oh yeah.
She talks about that idea about if somebody's mad at you, you may be under like a quote unquote psychic attack, but it's not intended, and it's not malicious, but it is something very interesting to think about, and another thing that you could potentially journal about.
Well, there's something a little extra. Actually, I talked about this yesterday in the class I did on Zoom, and I'll give you the very brief version of it. So once upon a time, I saw 2 magical practitioners that I both knew quite well. and they'd been locking horns over a variety of things, but they were like face to face yelling at each other, and it was like I'm standing there going, I'm just going to stand over here in the corner, and they were very, you know, intense and very articulate and poking at each other verbally, yada yada. A few days later, both of them separately call me and say, I think so and so cursed me. And I said, and I reported the same thing to both of them. What I could perceive was I saw flames and lashing tentacles out of each other's auras. You guys were like, you know, this tornado of intense emotion. And so both of you, I said to both of them, go take a cleansing bath and seek out your favorite form of energy healing. But here's the problem. Witches and magicians, sorcerers, whatever you call yourself, spend a lot of time trying to hook up their emotions and ideation to their magical power until it becomes part of that subtle muscle memory, to go back to that musical reference you had. So how about this? If you lose your cool and you're all worked up emotionally, you are now more than likely to engage your magical chops, because they've been you formed a conditioned link between clear, strong emotions and clear visualization or clear intention. So that even though a person is not actively doing a curse, if you are a magical person, I'm going to exaggerate because it'll stick better. You're in the same category of somebody who is trained in martial arts and was in the military. And if somebody sneaks up from behind you and does the wrong thing, somebody's likely getting a broken nose before there's a moment to think about it.
Yeah, it's so interesting that you talk about that, because I have direct experience, three very, very, one of them being pretty recent, three very, very unique and kind of, I was, you know, you always got to second guess yourself, right? You can't just jump to a conclusion, but you do have to examine all the information. And to me, these three particular instances were the clearest example of why in magic you are constantly admonished, right, over and over by everybody, to learn self-control and to learn to be at that still point. And it is kind of that old cliche, you know, with great power, you know, you have to be responsible with it and controlled, because at a certain point, yeah, like you're saying, absolutely, you can do damage that is completely unintended because of how automatic that is. I think that's it's another great point for practitioners out there and people who are just getting interested in this stuff and not really sure of how it applies to everything. But that's really, again, what I love about this conversation and about your work, is that there's this holistic consideration of everything: the theory, the practice, the active, the passive, and then the way it manifests on an interior level and an exterior, in your quote unquote magical mirror of the universe. So I have, you know, a few questions that are stock, you know, that I ask everybody, and we probably went over this, but I'll just see what your response is. How is it that you would say that you experience magic? I'll just leave that there.
Okay. I experience it when I'm making it or doing it, whether it's working or ritual. I am fortunate to have the full hookup in terms of full color, sight and sound, and so I tend to experience visually, seeing the energy moving in a ritual or from in between people and objects. I often have changes in the quality of sound in addition to hearing sounds when I'm doing any kind of magical work. I often, if it's the more important the working, the more likely this is. A day or two before, I will get kind of like a little pre-tremor echo of what is coming and what will be like. I often will have dreams or those moments when you're dazing out at the computer for a moment and something pops in your head. So kind of fully integrated. I mean, it shows up in my senses. It shows up in my internal life and my dream work. And then I wait and see what actually happened and see how it played out. And then, I take notes to see, okay, this worked in a particular way, and this and why did it work differently this time, even though I think I did everything the same. So I keep track of stuff. I don't know. I think it's a hard question for me because I don't think that there's a day that goes by that I don't do something that's energy work or magic of one kind or another. Even something as simple as one of our traditions, Covens, is going to be here later today because they're going to do their spring equinox thing. And everybody always says, your coffee is really nice. And I say, yeah, do you want to see what kind it is? And I open up the freezer and pull out this big giant can of Folgers, and they say, that can't be right. And I say, watch while I make the coffee. So I pouring the grounds, into the maker, and then I'm holding my hand over it and they're staring at me like, what are you doing? And it says, I am visualizing coffee beans and coffee trees and sunlight, and I am smelling the most delicious Ethiopian coffee that I've ever had, and I'm reminding that coffee that it is kin to that coffee. So I zap the grounds before I make the coffee, and everybody says it tastes better.
That's amazing. That's fantastic.
So, but the point is to get in the habit of every single day you do something that's magical. I will say another thing. I raise every morning as soon as I'm actually lucid. I wake up fast, but I get up at 5:30 every day, and I have my first cup of coffee because I am an addict. I need my coffee. And then I will raise energy and deposit it in myself to do whatever the things that are needed for the day. And also, there are a variety of spiritual entities that I'm in regular contact with. And and I put that kind of like as the backlog battery so that the contact doesn't drain me in the moment. I've already, here's the supply for the day to use for whatever.
That's awesome. I definitely think that there's definitely virtue in, especially like you're saying, getting up super early in the morning and getting yourself moving. I kind of have to do that as well, and forming a morning routine, specifically one of energy work and meditation. I was curious about that, about how much and what kind of energy work do you do? Is it Qigong? Is it something that you've learned just, I guess, through your teachers? Is it Western?
Half and half. I'm going to say that if you needed to categorize it, I would say it's lighting your solar fire, which is halfway inner Tiferet and halfway Dantian. It's so for me it starts with I'm lighting my inner sun every day. And but do I at the same time, and it's something as simple as visualizing my inner sun grow brighter until I feel like I've lit up from the inside and my whole body's like a golden lantern. And you know what, there's echoes of Asian stuff in there, there's echoes of Western stuff in there, and I'm also on a modern science level saying that I'm also activating the third largest nerve cluster in my body, which is in the gut. After the brain and the spinal column, the nerve cluster in the abdomen is the biggest chunk of neural tissue in the body. So I think that at this point, many things that I do, if I want to, I can start teasing out how did I come to do that. But it really is an amalgamation of all the different things that I've been exposed to and what worked for me and what didn't. I actually taught that technique to a friend. We were at an initiation ritual that was being held next door, and the house was a little on the chilly side, and she's prone to feeling cold. So I told her, put your hands so that one is here, right over the abdomen, and I want you to breathe in air and see the sparkles of light in the air until your lungs are glowing, and then breathe in again until you see those glowing particles circulating into your blood, and breathe again until you now have them settling into your bones, and your bones are glowing. And now see the bright sun in the core of you light up, and say, oh, she said, okay, I feel warm now. That, by the way, that particular technique, the reason we go from breath to blood to bone is because a lot of times when people are given the instruction of breathe in energy, take in energy, it's a pretty common instruction, right?
Yeah.
Well, the thing is that the transfer rate from energy from that you breathe in into your body is pretty slow. So the people think that they've taken in as much as they can, but if you then tell them to move it into the blood and then move it into the bone, you basically are actually filling up your whole capacity, rather than, oh, I breathed in as much as my lungs could take in, that's all there is. Because people tend to lock in into the physical sensation of my lungs are full means that I don't have any more room for energy.
Yeah, I get a very TCM, like traditional Chinese medicine visualization from that.
Isn't
It's very Eastern. I love that. Yeah, and also specifically because in that system, obviously, chi and blood are so interrelated.
Right. So entwined. Yeah.
Yeah, it's that again. It's the active or the active and the receptive right there. That's a very cool point.
Yeah, and
So
the bone adds duration for how long you can hang on to the energy.
Interesting. Yeah, for everybody that's listened to this podcast, I was wondering if you had, and I know this is kind of putting people on the spot, but it's just a tradition, and I feel like God. Do you have for everything that we've spoken about in the last almost hour that people want to kind of investigate further and parse out for themselves? Do you have 3 recommendations, either in terms of books or in terms of documentary or YouTube or anything like that, or practices that you would recommend for people to start kind of exploring some of these ideas?
Are we talking about magic in general?
Yeah, sure. Magic, energy work.
Okay, and this is going to sound fairly random in some regards, but I'm going to say it's coming from an offbeat place. Any of Rupert Sheldrake's books.
Oh, wow.
Now, the reason being that there's a lot of cool stuff. Rupert Sheldrake is the proponent for the idea of morphogenetic field being the shaping influence for life forms. And I said any of his books because honestly, he is a little bit of a one-trick pony, and all the books are really elaborations on the same theme to some degree or another.
Okay.
But I think that having a sense of your connection and place to life energy as it relates to species and to the ecology of life on the planet is an important place, because even if you are doing celestial magic or working with spirits of various flavors, you know what? The bulk of the magical energy that you will ever draw upon comes from other living beings on the planet. So that's the first place that you learn. I think, do I have a copy of it nearby? I do.
Pulling it out of the leaves.
All right. Ancient Tome. It is just a book on astrology that is not mine, but is called Astrology, the Divine Science. And it's by Marcia Moore and Mark Douglas. And it's out of print, but thankfully you can find copies of it. Now, why am I recommending it? Because it is a weird little niche in that it talks about the planets, the signs, the change of the ages. It's a soup to nuts kind of book, but it's coming at it from a very spiritual and very magical perspective, even though there's not a single spell or ritual in the book. But it gives you that kind of background. And if I had to say a way to get the language of astrology into your system, by the way, if you don't want to do astrology and you'd prefer to be a Kabbalah geek, that's cool too. Or if alchemy is going to call to you more, or hermetics, I don't care. But get a system into you and have it solidified in you, because we need to have symbols and words in order to do these things. We really do. And not to say that ecstatic stuff that goes beyond cognition and visualization doesn't happen a lot in magic. It does. But having a solid grounding in a symbol set is a very powerful first step to prepare for magic. And I also tell anybody that if you do any kind of divination, all the tools of divination are tools of magic. There is a reciprocity, a transitive property that if something can be used to receive guidance, it can be used to exert that same force or essence to create something. But anyway, but I love that book. It's ancient, not ancient, but it's out of print. It's old. But honestly, that was one of the first books that I encountered and said, oh, I can use my astrology for magic, even though the authors don't mention that. Now, you said 3, and this is where I'm beginning to clog up because my head is now filled with more books than 3.
As many as you want, man.
As many as you want, man. So I'm actually going to, since I mentioned her, I'm actually going to suggest Dolores Ashcroft Nowitzki's Highways of the Mind, which is a little tome on pathworking, guided visualization, but it gives you a lot of tools for the work, because I'm going to say that if you are doing a ritual properly, it is for all intents and purposes live action role playing a pathworking. You're LARPing a pathworking. You're enacting a dream. And it is through enacting the dream and using the dream logic that connects to both higher and lower self that magic happens. So oddly enough, one of the tools that I find gets you there faster is learning how to dream walk, so that as you're walking, look, if I'm walking in a ritual and I need an altar that is a 9-sided altar made out of solid amethyst because I'm doing a particular lunar working, I don't have the budget for that. However, I can stand and I can make myself see the altar that I put a purple cloth on be a 9-sided slab of amethyst acting as my altar. So that the magic, to compare it to something that is in the popular mind right now, magic is augmented reality without the use of technology.
Wow. Yeah.
You're seeing the overlay. You're seeing the overlay, except you're creating the overlay rather than wearing Google glasses.
Yeah, and it's really interesting because it takes time to form that, and that's something that I try to explain to students, is that the question comes is like, the question that they consistently have is typically like, am I supposed to be seeing this stuff in the room, or am I just knowing that it's there? And well, I can tell you, because I definitely don't have the full kind of sensory experience that you have, but I definitely can see, feel, and move energy.
Yep.
And the thing is, like, the way that it's going to happen for me is going to be different.
Right.
Dispositionally, and then not only that, but the amount of time that I've spent developing this stuff. But eventually I feel like you develop the image in the mind, the imaginal faculty, the astral faculty, and you see it there. And then let's just use boilerplate ritual that everybody knows, the LBRP, or the lesser ritual of the pentagram in general. You should be seeing this overlay eventually when that skill is honed, and you see it there as if it's real, but it's not the same as other 3-dimensional objects in the room. It's there. You're projecting it, and that's kind of I've never really used that word before, so I'm glad that you kind of peppered that out there. Overlay. It truly is. Magic definitely is all about the overlay, and you see it even if, like, you pick up, if you pick up the black brick, Reggerty's black brick, and you just thumb through some of the Golden Dawn rituals in there, or the Stella Matutina rituals. That's the first thing that's delineated. The rituals are path workings. They're telling you which path you're going to travel right now. And then you've got the pillars that they move like a cursor. where you're going next. It's the doorway to which path you're about to traverse. But I feel as if in this conversation, man, I truly do. I feel like I'm sitting at the feet of a master here. So I'm really, really thankful that you took time out of your day to come and talk to me. It's just been brilliant, and I'm so intrigued. So are you on like a conference circuit or something like that? Where can people catch you if you're working around?
So it's remarkably easy to find where I'm going to be next. My website is ivodominguzjr.com, and my full name and .com, and I list where I'm going to be next. And that's the easiest way to keep track of me. Also, go there because you have to dig through a ton of pages, but there's a ton of path workings there for the 8 seasonal holidays and full moon, dark moon, yada, yada. That's free content that you can listen to or download that might be fun and useful. There's also a bunch of chants there as well. There's also a link back to, I used to blog moderately regularly, and there's a link to where those all are at the moment. So that's the easiest way to find me and keep up with me, honestly. Hey, I'm going to say one last thing about pathworking, though. The conference so this is a practice that we do a lot. We're doing the large main ritual at this conference in between the World Sacred Space and April. And also, before the ritual that people attend, we've traditionally always written a pathworking that either people listen to it the day before or whatever. This year, we also recorded an MP3 of it. And the pathworking is not one and the same as the outline for the ritual, but it is thematically what is actually happening in the ritual, and the quality of experience people have by having listened to a pathworking that basically explains the symbolism of the ritual before they attend the ritual is in some ways more effective than simply going through the outline of these are the ritual steps and these are the chants that we're going to be using. So I recommend, if you're going to be doing a group ritual, consider the practice of creating a short path working as a precursor work or prerequisite work for the ritual.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, Ivo Dominguez Jr., thank you so much, man, again, for coming on the podcast. And I hope to speak to you again.
Yeah, I had a lot of fun. This would be great.